Right, I've kept you in suspense long enough now. Let's go ahead and I will reveal to you the final idea I've got for the Vambraces here. Now, of course, feel free to come up with something very different of your own, but for me personally, I reviewed it, and whilst the laces and everything were tempting to go with, I think because the rest of her is lacking that kind of, shoelaced based look, let's say. I'm going to coin that as an official term. I think it would be remiss to add that to the Vambrace, because that kind of starts to set a bit of a precedent then that I don't really want to set right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do something slightly radical. Now, this is slightly beneficial, just in case you did want to change something up, but we are actually going to change up what we've done with the Vambrace up until now, and it's not going to be such a drastic change, but what it does mean is that we are going to get rid of this kind of little channel that we've got going on here, and we're just going to favor a more basic cylinder shape. Okay, I'm sorry if that means that causes slightly more work, but I do want to show you an effective way of sort of kind of going back to the drawing board a little bit, and you probably already know what it is, but we are going to use the facilities of Dynamesh. Now, if you go over to Dynamesh here, make sure that you've got the Vambrace subtool selected, of course. Hit Dynamesh. It says it's got multiple subdivision levels, but we no longer care about that, so we hit yes. That's fine, and you can probably see now, if we go to Polyfill here, I think it hasn't quite activated yet. There we go, Dynamesh. Okay, so you can see the immediate change in topology there. Okay, now it has got a little bit funky. It's got very, very strange topology, but that's quite normal for Dynamesh. But what it is going to allow us to do is just kind of fundamentally change the shape of this Vambrace, let's say. Okay, so we want to simplify it down. So I'm just going to smooth out some of these areas here. And you see it is going to get rid of that channel that we did spend a bit of time doing. But the nice thing about Dynamesh, if you're new to ZBrush, once you control, click and drag an empty space, it kind of realigns the kind of topology for you again, so you've got enough, and you always have enough to work with. The nice thing about this is that we are going to be able to shape this now to the proper shape that we want. In this case here, I'm just going to restore the original kind of cylindrical shape of the Vambrace. I want it to kind of come down there where the wrist is. Okay, so pretty much going back to the concept art that I had earlier. Okay, just kind of going to fill out all those different edges there up until we hit the part that is the shirt. That's fine. Let's see what that looks like isolated. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, that's no problem. We just want to make sure we haven't got that kind of channel in there anymore. And if it's slightly biased like it is there, that's fine, so long as it's kind of conforming to the glove that we've got here. Okay, so obviously we can come and do some tweaks a little bit later on there, but Dynamesh is a nice way to sort of hit the reset button if you're going to make some quite big changes. Okay, now you could have done this with ZRemesh because the changes weren't that massive, but it was always nice to show you a new tool. Okay, so just going to control click and drag an empty space to change the topology one more time. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go back to ZRemesh, and I'm going to tell it, okay, I'm going to give you about 5k polys to play with, change the adapter size down a little bit, and we've got no any groups, so it doesn't matter. Let's just go ahead and hit ZRemesh and see what it does. Okay, so you can see there that we've got a nice clean topology basically restored, so we can start working with this. Now that we've got this Vambrace quote-unquote restored, what are my grand ideas for this? Well, allow me to explain using the masking tool. I want to keep these belts pretty much going as it is. Okay, those kind of straps should stay there, but instead of having this kind of channel on the inside where we probably have to lace it up or anything like that, or it looks kind of empty if it was just a strap all the way around, what I'd like to do instead is actually have like because these gloves are sort of for fencing more than they are for shooting, I almost want a kind of cover that would come around the front like this. Can you see what I'm kind of masking out there? I'm kind of masking out this kind of like layer essentially that you would build on top there and kind of give it like an extra kind of padding onto that. Okay, just so that if any kind of sword strikes or whatever kind of slash across the upper lengths of her arm, it's kind of protected. So it's like a bit of an arm guard and a Vambrace, even though a Vambrace is an arm guard, but I think you get what I mean. But this way, what we can do with this is that we can actually, well, maybe not that far over, but if we just kind of cut it off there and bring it back round to where we had the channel before, we can almost kind of tuck it in a seam like fashion there. Okay, so we've got a lot of this kind of area surface here to do some kind of nice patterns or whatever kind of styling we want to do to it later on. But we don't have to conform to this, of course. We could just put it around here, but we do, I think, want to hide it. Maybe something like that. Okay, so it looks like it's just on the very top surface of a wrist, and it kind of curls around. You can see it a little bit from the front. I think I would probably bring it back around there, probably a little bit, not so far down, probably cut it off just above this lower wrist belt there, something like that. So it's a bit of an arm guard kind of built into the Vambrace. Okay, I hope that makes sense anyway. Alright, so that's the idea that I'm going to go for here, but it's a little bit too low poly right now. We can't do much with this, okay, even though the masking is valid. You can, if you want, extract this and create a whole new subtool with it, but in my opinion that's quite unnecessary for what it is, so I'm going to just keep it all in the same mesh. Okay, just going to pull that down a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to subdivide it a little bit more, and just for kind of making sure it all fits nicely here, I'm going to come in with the pinch tool, and I'm just going to make sure that around here I've got an established kind of edge that basically the wrist part of the glove slots into. At the moment it's a little bit ill-defined because we've dynameshed it and we've Z-remeshed it, and of course with dynamesh we hit the reset button there. So just with the pinch tool there, just come about and just set a loose kind of border there, definition of where the wrist kind of slots into the Vambrace there. Okay, and of course do any adjustments that you'd like to do using the move tool and what have you. Okay, and when you single that out, you should be able to see we've got this kind of edge defined there. It's only loosely defined, it's not very clear, but that's what we want for now. Okay, you probably already guessed what's coming, but we do want to just introduce the idea that it is hollow. It's not a solid mass, so we do have to kind of push this stuff in. I'm going to use the standard brush to do this with. I'm going to flip the mask there, and just using the standard brush, I'm just going to use the inverse there. Now I'm using the standard brush because it's slightly less destructive than the clay build-up brush. The clay build-up brush can sometimes penetrate on the outside layers a little bit, which is not so helpful here, but the standard brush gets the job done nice and neatly. You could do the same up here. In fact, I think I'll just do a small little pass with the standard brush in there, but I'm not too bothered about this because obviously this is covered by her overhanging kind of sleeves. Okay, so it's not such a big priority to do the same there. Okay, but if you do see like a little bit of a strange shape like this, I would recommend taking the time just to kind of round it out a little bit more, just so it's a bit more uniformed essentially, because even though it is kind of handmade and there are going to be slight errors and it's not going to be fully straight, we do want more or less a correct shape where it doesn't look so knobbly. Yeah, I think knobbly is a good adjective to use there. That's fine. Okay, right, so with that done, you can see how the wrist slots in there. It slots in much more kind of comfortably. That looks complete now. Okay, so let's continue with what we were going to do there. We subdivide it a little bit more, and just so that we have enough kind of subdivision and what can we call it, resolution is the word I'm looking for, that we can actually start masking that area out. So I want to start somewhere up here. I'm just going to pencil it out, so I don't really want it coming too much into the middle section of the Vambrace, just a little bit kind of there, and I probably wouldn't go any further down here. That would be the extremity I'd probably go to, and I just want to keep it above that strap there, and I do want to go about halfway around to this area here, and you can see I'm just keeping the line quite defined. Okay, and just masking that off there, and now I'm going to solo it out to see what I've got, and I've got this kind of shape here going. That's not too bad. I think I'm going to make it a little bit lower, just kind of change the angle on that a bit. There we go. Oops, a bit more there, straighten that all the way up. So I've finally got this idea where we can have some kind of like sword or dueling guard on her Vambrace now, which was kind of missing from the concept art before. It wasn't really there. So it's nice to actually have a solution to that now. she's got like a bit of armor. And the nice thing is when we move over to Substance Painter and we start to texture all this and apply materials, we can really apply a nice kind of pattern to this particular second layer here. Okay, there you go. We don't have to get too definitive about where that is, because once again it's handmade, so it's going to be a little bit kind of imperfect. Just be consistent with our masking there. Okay, one final look to see how it would fit on the arm guard. Yes, I quite like the way that is there, except over here I don't want this to be very round. I want this to be probably quite a fine edge like that. Okay, but don't worry about it. You can always adjust it once you've done the next step too. Okay, in fact, I'm just going to leave that tapering there a little bit just in case, just to kind of show you how you can change the shape a little bit once we've done this next part. So I'm going to flip the mask over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that pseudo effect again. Okay, so I'm not interested. You could, and this is what I used to do before when I was a wee ZBrusher. I just go into layer brush and yay, let's bump up the layers. But as soon as you leave go, you are creating more layers, and you can see here we're starting to get some distortion there, so it's not a very great tool for doing this with. Instead, what I'm going to do is fake the edges. So I'm going to fake that layer by taking a standard brush, probably not on intensity 25 though, probably around the 10s. I'm just going to focus on raising the edges up out of here. Okay, and don't worry if it's going through that belt now, that's not a concern at this point in time. Okay, now when you get to the kind of edges here, you're kind of extruding it with the standard brush. Okay, so you're kind of telling it to kind of release or kind of enlarge from where it is right now. When you get to this edge here, you want to maintain that kind of inner sort of volume as well. You can use the inflate brush instead. Okay, now just use it sparingly because we don't want to make the top part look too bulbous or anything like that. So you've got to be careful just how much we use it. But we do want to be pretty clear about this layer here. Okay, so just go around it, make sure it's all roughly the same sort of height, or it's all been extruded roughly the same height and level all the way around. Okay, a little bit more up there, just to match. Okay, so it doesn't actually matter if this part here is raised, because we've just kind of created the effect that it looks like it's raised even though it might not be. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the pinch tool now. I'm going to use it a little bit earlier than we would usually, and we have done before, and we're just going to help define that edge now, because now that the edge is nice and thick, we can use the pinch tool as a bit of wiggle room to help define just this very kind of sharp edge that we've just kind of pulled out and extruded out here with the standard brush. Okay, and this will help sell the idea that it's like an extra layer that's been added on. Alright, fabulous. Okay, so if we release the mask, that's what we've got. If we put it back in, we can see we've got a pretty solid Vambrace there, no problem. Okay, we've got that second layer working out for us nicely, but of course it is clipping with the belts now. You can go ahead and move that in, but right now I think the bigger priority is to focus on getting that kind of separation of the two layers. So we're going to use our damn standard brush, and looking at the resolution here now, I'm going to divide it once more. So we're now in 300s of thousands of vertex points, and we're just going to come in here. We're just going to define that line a little bit more. So you can see I didn't do a very good job checking about how raised up this particular area was here. So I'm going to have to do some fixes there. But that's no big deal. I'll show you how to do them. And let's just come in here. So we don't want it raised up completely or too high, at least not in my estimation. My design is to have it very much sort of look like an extra kind of layer of leather that's just been kind of tacked on there and held down by the straps a little bit, you know. So I'm not looking to like add a big steel plate or anything like that on this Vambrace here. That's not the intention. Okay, and once you've defined the line in there like so, use the inverse of that to simply just heighten the edge. That is the new layer we've just extruded. Okay, you might only have to do this in certain places, probably not all the way around. Okay, and you can see there by doing that on the edges where you can kind of control how tall it all sits. Okay, let's smooth that out. Okay, so let's smooth it out around there as well. Okay, fabulous. Right, so I want this to be quite low. I don't want it to be too high. So let's just pinch this out. And as we pinch it, we can go down a lower subdivision level. As we pinch it, it's going to get closer and closer. It's going to bring the two layers kind of closer together. And I'll demonstrate this from this angle here. You can see that there, we're just kind of getting a bit closer and closer as we're basically pinching the two layers back to meet each other. But now, unlike before, we've got very, very clear, defined two layers now, okay, which is a nice change. Alright, fantastic. Okay, and if you want this to kind of be extra protective, which I do want it to look like, it can't be too round, so I'm going to come in with the trim dynamic brush here and just sort of kind of make it look a bit more plainer. Like, now we've done this multiple times before, so you know what the effect I'm trying to get here is. Basically just trimming the fat essentially, okay, because it is like another layer of leather kind of wrapped on here, so I do want to have it look like it's pretty what could we sort of say, rigid would be the term. Okay, so just be careful around the edges that you just don't trim too much, and then once you're happy with the effect, go ahead and smooth that out. Okay, there we go. There you go. So it's quite a simple idea. Nothing, well, nothing spectacular, nothing wow amazing, but it's an effective way to sort of convey the kind of extra layer on the vambrace there. Okay, now I said here, if you want to change the trajectory of your kind of vambrace, I don't particularly, but you can use the pinch brush, of course, to manipulate the trajectory. So an extreme example, you can see there, I could kind of create an Iron Man gauntlet or something, but it does kind of come at the cost of the thickness of that layer. So just be quite careful about how much you commit to using the pinch tool to change trajectory. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to do is just kind of tidy this up a little bit before we kind of end this particular video. And because it was Dynamesh before, I just want to come and do the same fat trimming around the edges there that we defined for the wrist. Okay, just because, again, it's leather, it's not a fabric that's round and soft. It should look quite sturdy, it should look quite hard. So I am just going to come in and basically trim away that fat, essentially. Okay. And I'm going to do that vertically going down, just the same way I did on the top there. Okay. And I probably should have done this at a lower subdivision level. Might have been a bit easier, but it doesn't matter. Either way, it's fine. It just means longer time smoothing things out, that's all. Okay. So instead of that kind of round, soft edge, we've got this kind of like tapered edge now, which is basically what a leather vambrace edge would look like. Okay, it's kind of tapered at the end, unless it's very soft, you know, kind of thick leather, you get that kind of tapering effect instead. Okay, fabulous. Right, so another thing I would probably do here is I'd probably just look at what tools the best to do this. A clay buildup, perhaps? No, I don't think clay buildup was going to help us here. I'd almost want to use the trim dynamic brush. Okay, yeah, you can use the trim dynamic brush as well, just to hollow out the insides, so that the same way the insides aren't too round looking. Okay. Something like that. Okay. Alright. Fabulous. Okay, starting to look pretty good. Alright. Now, the only thing I want to do before we kind of close this video out here is I want to introduce the kind of seam lines. So even though we're not doing the kind of cross laces or anything like that, we are going to have to think about how this glove is assembled. It's obviously going to be, you know, it was one piece of leather that got wrapped around, so where's that seam going to be? And I think that seam should be here at the back. Okay, now there doesn't have to be just one seam, you can have more than one seam, that's absolutely fine, but I'm just going to go for now at least, one seam right here, and I'm going to make that almost my emergent point, essentially. Okay, for this kind of thing too, this extra layer to be strapped around. Now if you're wondering how I did that red line there, it's click, hold down shift and then drag, and basically it does a straight line stroke for you. Very, very handy. I once saw that in a quick little kind of ZBrush kind of YouTube video guide there. I wish I'd known about that feature a lot earlier in my career, especially when making hard surface things. But oh well, never mind, that's fine. But that's a really handy way of just kind of getting a very definitive line there. Okay. Now we've got this little edge here. This is a bit of an issue. I don't know why for the life of me ZBrush likes to do that, but can be a bit of a battle of attrition here. Oh dear, that doesn't look too good. But it's okay, that's kind of natural as to how the Vambrace would go. There would be a bit of a gap there, so that doesn't look too nice like that. But if we do come in and pinch it, it does make it kind of look better. Okay. I would think that perhaps a extra round of Z remesh may address that completely. I'm just going to use the inverse there. Help introduce the idea that these are two separate pieces. So Alt, click, Shift and drag. Maybe up there. Just to, nope, don't autosave. Just to create this kind of crease there to show this is where the two pieces of, well, the two edges of the same leather piece wrap around and meet here. Okay. Okay, just a bit more. Just you could go really ham in this gap essentially because it is the gap between the two edges of the leather. Okay. We have lost a bit of definition. It must be from the trim dynamic we did earlier. So let's just come in and add a bit more of that. Oops, I'm a bit offline. Ah, that's because my trackpad is slanted. My trackpad has lost its rubber feet, unfortunately. My trackpad, my drawing tablet, it's kind of lost its rubber feet, so there we go. Okay, anyway, that's the idea there. We're probably going to refine that a little bit more anyhow. Okay, so what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to refine that kind of part a little bit more, and of course we're going to have to kind of create some folds here that represent the leather fabric it's made out of. And spoiler alert, it's going to be very similar to the folds we created on the hand and the glove already. Okay, fantastic job guys. So let's go ahead and jump over to the next video where we'll start creating some of those folds.